Welcome back to the Future Skills podcast. My guest this week is Scott Manson from Morrison Data Services. Scott is the Head of Technical Safety and Assurance at MDS, and we'll be discussing how he got into the energy sector, smart metering, and what's coming up in the future with EV. Hi Scott, welcome to the Future Skills podcast.
Hi Dan.
Thank you very much for joining us today. It's really appreciated. Really wanted to get you onto the podcast to discuss everything MDS and what's happening at Morrison's Data Services at the moment in the energy sector. And also wanted to get yourself on as well. It's a bit similar to myself. You worked at British Gas. So what we like to do with our guests on the podcast as a bit of a starter is a little bit about your history and where your skills journey started in the workplace.
Yeah, so I started with British Gas. Wow, it'll be nearly 20 years ago now. So, and it's quite funny. I joined British Gas because I had a few different family members that worked in the British Gas offices in Leeds.
Right.
And I was fresh out of college and thinking, what do I want to do? Do I want to go to university? I actually had plans on being a teacher. I joined British Gas as a 6-month put me on job just in the offices. And very quickly after joining, I realised that actually the energy industry as a whole had lots of opportunity. And if you were someone who had a little bit of nous about you and you wanted to work hard, that there were all sorts of career opportunities. And very quickly, even at 18 years old, very quickly I started progressing up through the ranks within British Gas. So I actually started in the office environment, working in customer services and complaints and escalated complaints, and then got into some of the more technical side of the billing side of things, where we're dealing with accounts that were absolutely messed up from a data perspective. And then I moved into learning development, and I worked in learning development for about 5 years, and became a learning development manager. And then I moved across to the revenue protection world, and I worked with the revenue protection team and debt team, and through working with those teams, my career continued to develop, and I eventually landed as being the head of people and capability, which essentially covered everything from training, onboarding people, getting people to the right level of skill. I had a compliance team, so the guys going out, carrying out the audits, and the safety function sat underneath me as well. So we covered everything, debt and revenue protection, from the guys out on the ground making visits to customers' homes in rather challenging environments, to the offices where they were taking the calls and doing all the back office work. I was in that role for around about 10 years in total, and then made the decision back end of last year to move over to MDS, where I'm now head of technical safety and assurance. That's the brief history of my journey.
Very similar history to myself, actually, at British Gas. I started in customer service at 17, loved it. I was selling home care, and people would phone in with a boiler breakdown, and you'd look at what home care package they could look at, and then it moved to insurance, so it got a little bit more difficult to deal with. But and then the engineering opportunity came up for me, and then I went into learning development as well. How did you find the decision to break away from British Gas? Because a lot of the people I know for myself, and a lot of the people that I speak to now who work at Universal Skills are, just ex-colleagues that are still friends. It was a huge decision for them, because for me, it felt as if there was quite a big blanket around me at British Gas at times, and, almost a little bit frightened to leave. What was it like for you?
Yeah, absolutely the same. So I never envisaged getting to the point in my career where I would look to leave British Gas. And it's funny when we said, being there from being just turned 18, I was a boy when I joined, and I lived at home with my mum and dad, and carefree, And I was through British Gas. I went through some kind of major life events. Unfortunately, I lost my dad at quite a young age, and the company were there and supported me. I met my wife at British Gas. I had children when I was at British Gas. And through all those major life events, the one constant were actually British Gas. And they were a terrific company to work for, really supportive. And I was really, really proud and still am proud to have spent so long at British Gas. But the time comes where you need to experience something new. What you were protected in that British Gas bubble. You looked after your own little bit of the world, and the commercial realities of the business world probably didn't impact on you too much. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to expose myself to is probably some of the more harsher commercial realities of the world, because that almost toughens you up from a commercial acumen perspective. And that's one of the things that I'm really keen on moving to MDS to experience the other side of the energy industry almost without necessarily that much protection there, and where you have to be exposed to a lot more from an experience perspective. So the move, it was a daunting one, but it's absolutely been so beneficial from an experience perspective for me, and getting to see things from a different angle, and getting involved in probably some of the more commercial side of discussions has definitely been eye-opening and really good for me from an experience perspective.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. You mentioned the word support there at British Gas. I'd completely agree with you. I don't think I realised myself, I'd just come close to 10 years when I left. I didn't realise myself just how much support was on tap, really, whenever you need it. And similar to you, I had my kids while I worked at British Gas. I got married while working there, and that was the constant. And I was proud to hold that brand. I know my parents were proud as well when they said, "Oh, my son works at British Gas." And I look back and think to myself, so thankful of the skills that they gave me, because actually for me as a stepping stone from school, when I look back now, is exactly what I needed in terms of what I needed to understand for the working life. And I don't know about yourself, but I've realised going into different workplaces now, working with different companies, some of the skills that I didn't even realise that I got at British Gas, being able to take those into different environments now in different workplaces has been really important over this last few years. Would you say it's been similar for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost kind of some of the basics and particularly around governance and control. It gives you a real good foundation of understanding what's required. Absolutely. I couldn't be more thankful really to British Gas for giving me that foundation to move on to bigger and better things. I think it absolutely, it really does put you in good stead, and it's a really strong brand, and just when people know that you've worked for British Gas for a long time, they know that you must be good at what you do, because people don't stick in jobs for that long if they're not. So I think reputationally it's really good to have on your record too.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned RPU as well, interesting there, because something I used to really enjoy was revenue protection visits. As an engineer, obviously you had to have your wits about you a little bit at times, but just how much did you enjoy the revenue protection side of the business? Yeah,
it was, I always say it's kind of the sexy part of the industry almost. It's so exciting. It comes with risk, because you're visiting customers who very much don't want you there, and who will actively try and stop you there, and working on warrants. And I wasn't brave enough to do it as a day job, but working with that team and just in the revenue protection part of the industry is, there's some real sense of job satisfaction and reward working in that environment, because you come across customers who need support, who need help. And we always used to use the term, there's the needy and the greedy when it comes to energy theft. Those that are doing it just because they can't afford to pay the bills. And if it's either do that or not have heating. And when you've got kids in the mix and all that, so obviously the moral side of things, it's never right to steal, and it's highly dangerous. And that was the thing that we used to spend a lot of time and effort on, is raising awareness of the dangers of it. But you're visiting people who either need that support, and the sense of being able to help those people and try and show them a different way out, and making the property safe, particularly when you've got children in there. You've got some real, we call them a ticking time bomb. You've got little kids running around, and there's loops on the meter that if they happen to touch it, you dread to think what could happen. And you do see the horror stories in the press where things go wrong and houses explode or people get electrocuted. So there's a real sense of pride in making everybody safer, because it's not just the house that's doing it, it's the neighbours, it's when it comes to commercial properties, and it's customers that are in those properties. So the real sense of pride in doing the right thing and supporting those that need the support, but also then catching those that are doing it for other reasons. A lot of stuff linked to organised crime. Very rewarding part of the business, quite an exciting part of the industry to work in. Really enjoyable times working in that environment.
And I think in the energy sector, people tend to understand revenue protection and warrants. I certainly have a vague understanding of it, but new entrants that join us sometimes in the training centre, when you start to explain these scenarios, and a lot of people outside of the energy sector just can't believe that actually it's quite a common process that people do steal energy, and they tamper with the gas meter, tamper with the electric meter. They, forced entry has to happen to make things safe, and to, go and put a pay-as-you-go meter in there because people haven't paid the bill for years. And we see it in the training rooms where people are like, really, does that happen? Because I think sometimes outside looking in, people just think it's quite a simple process. Energy, you have a gas meter, you have an electric meter, and you pay your bill, but it's far from the truth.
Yeah, so you're right. There's people probably who are new to the industry or not in the industry, don't even realise it's a thing. And it's huge. I think it's estimated around about £400 million a year that gets stolen. Wow. It's costing every customer about £20 a year on the bill to pay for those that are stealing. But what I find really interesting is actually even people within the industry, there's very little knowledge around what revenue protection is, and certainly around the commercial impacts of it. So, British Gas spent a lot of time and effort understanding what the commercial impact of energy theft is, and actually how, by dealing with it and turning the tap off, you reduce your imbalance charges. You also can collect some money back off the customers that have been stealing. So it does commercially make sense. And I don't think that commercial reality is understood widely across the industry. So I think a lot of suppliers probably just see it as an obligation that they've got to do. And then it goes a step further because of that lack of understanding. And I see it with meter workers, because the meter workers, the engineers are just fitting meters. And generally, again, they've been invited by the customer. The customer knows we're coming, so you're not really going to many where these thefts are taking place. The guys are not used to seeing it.
Yeah.
And one of my call outs is, you're testing dead procedures, and is so crucial, because we get examples where people assume they've powered down, so they assume that the power's off. And then they go on to find out that actually there's a rogue cable that's gone direct to mains that they didn't realise was still powered up. So I think there's a real safety message there for anybody working in and around meters, is that just because you've powered down doesn't mean that the power's definitely off, because unfortunately you will have come across the ones where something's been done, and it might not be that customer that you're visiting. It could have been a previous customer who's done it, and the new person who's moved into that property doesn't know it's happened. So it's one of the key safety messages to me is never assume that because you've powered down that there isn't still power going into that property, because there just could be. And we come across examples of it, and it takes the guys by shock that, well, I powered down. How would I expect it to know that it'd still be live? And that, I guess that comes back to then some of those fundamental principles around testing, because you just never know.
No, and there's some sophisticated tampers out there for sure. I've come to a few of them, and it's interesting you mentioned there with basically a live at the bottom of the cutout, potentially going behind the board that you can't see. And they can be really hard to spot if you're not got your testing right, and it can cause major challenges for the installer. And it brings us nicely to that word safety. Just what does safety mean to you, Scott, in your role? And if you look at the last 20 years that have taken you to where you are now, how does safety impact what you do, and what does it mean to you in your role?
So I guess it probably comes back to a little bit of principles as to what I see as me wanting to get out of my working life. And the fundamental priority to me is everybody goes home to the family.
Yeah.
So you come to work, and everybody works to provide the best lifestyle possible. Generally that's why people are in work. Some of us come to work for the love of it as well. But generally, people should be coming to work and going home, I believe, in a better state than they left the house in the morning. So I think work should be something you enjoy, and it should be something that improves your life. So I've always had a real focus, and it probably comes back to those learning development days. I want to create an environment where people come to work, the developer's a worker, the developer's a person, they go home a better person. And I guess the fundamental aspect of that is that they go home safe. I'm sure that's probably shaped by life events like losing my father when I was quite young. I see how precious life is. And I don't want anybody to be, even just people going through the motions day in, day out. I think, it feels like such a waste to me personally. So when people come to work, I want them to enjoy the time at work. I want them to get better. And ultimately, I want them to move on to bigger, better things in work and in life. You can't do that if you're getting injured at work, because it ruins lives. And we see so many examples where accidents happen at work, and it changes people's lives forever. And I could never live myself knowing that I'd worked in an area of a business and somebody had been hurt and there was something I could have done about it. And I guess I almost implore everybody to take that responsibility as well. That if you work in an area, your first priority has got to be that people go home and they go home safely. Because how would you feel about it if they didn't? And if it were a known issue that you could have done something about, you've got to live with that for the rest of your life. And life's just too short for that.
Yeah, and you've suffered that devastating loss by what sounds as quite a young age for you. I can't imagine, because my dad is my best friend, somebody I speak to every day. A bit of a running joke in our house, but it's the only person that really texts and calls me. And he's on holiday actually at the moment. I'm picking up from the airport later. I'm excited to see him because he is my best friend, and I can't imagine how that impacted your life. But you've experienced firsthand that devastation. And I suppose with safety, that is the worst case scenario, that potentially if somebody does miss a test, or somebody doesn't follow protocol, or rushes, or misses something that they're trained to pick up on, but they've just got a little bit naive and sort of, I always think in metering sometimes, some people don't take it as serious and realise the size of the main fuse in your hand and the pressure of gas coming through as well at the incoming service supply. So, we always try and reinforce that in the training centre and make sure people realise, listen, guys, girls, what you're dealing with there is live gas and electric that's coming from the street that's extremely powerful. And if that goes wrong, then we're training you so it doesn't. But if it does, you need to be absolutely 100% following everything to the letter, because you'll have seen examples yourself, I guess, as well, of it going wrong out there in the industry. Yeah,
absolutely. And I wouldn't even like to put a percentage on it, but it's near on 100% of the more serious incidents that I've seen over the years. They've not been down to a competency issue. It's very rare that the person didn't know what to do. It is nearly always down to a risk has been taken for various different reasons. And I think that almost our biggest risk in our industry is the volume of work we do safely actually becomes one of our biggest risks, because people become desensitized to the risk, because they fit 8-10 meters a day, and the vast majority of those are very similar. It's very straightforward. That familiarity and the routine of just going through the motions on them can kick in, and throwing a little bit of pressure on, which I guess probably the whole industry is feeling at the moment, given the volatility and the need to put as many meters on walls as possible. Any sort of distraction when you're working in, I always liken it to driving, where it can become second nature. And when you're driving along, for those that might be non-technical that listen to this, driving's a really good example for me. You get so used to driving, and you drive those same roads, and how many times you get to the destination and you can't remember the trip, because you've just got there in second, kind of without autopilot. Absolutely, and there's a real risk that we can get like that when we're going about the day job, and then you get a phone call or some distraction, and these are the things that we just got to be constantly aware of the danger that is right in front of us. And it's a tough one, because you've got to keep that communication going, because they get so familiar. And I think desensitized to the risk is how I would best phrase it. And that's when the mistakes happen.
Yeah. I think there's an immunity almost sometimes. And that's why, we push so heavily for retraining, and we get people back in just to make sure that we're going back over those dangers, because it only takes that one time to take your eye off the ball, and something catastrophic can happen with live gas and electric. So rolling things forward to the current sort of climate and the energy sector that we're in at the moment, and things at Morrison's Data Services. So how's the smart metering world there? You've got a lot of installers. How are things in the smart metering side at Morrison's Data Services?
Yeah, so I'm really good. It's a great place to work with some really good people. And again, what you see is, I think you get this across the energy industry as a whole. There's a lot of people who want to do a really good job. Clearly there are some challenges at the moment in the industry, around volumes of meters on walls is one, and there's a lot of competition in the market. But it's a really exciting time, because there's new opportunities coming. I know we'll probably touch on EV and the whole future energy kind of world that undoubtedly we're gonna start getting into. So I think it's a really exciting time. We're right at the front of it, and we're almost, I think, those of us that would want to be early adapters, we're probably hamstrung a little bit, because the infrastructure isn't quite where it needs to be, for us to really get stuck into it. But I think it's a really exciting time at the moment, and I guess it's an opportunity to develop. It's an opportunity. There's opportunities out there to learn new skills and get into new markets, and that really excites me. And I think you can feel that buzz certainly across MDS, that there are exciting things coming.
Yeah, I mean, in the smart meter industry, there's certainly lots to be done, and like you said, there's lots of competition out there. And at the moment, it's a strange time, I think, because there's quite a few of the smaller energy companies that are having difficulties with the rise in gas prices, and obviously some of the smaller ones have closed, and there's things going on around there. But you mentioned about future skills, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but I know Morrison's Data Services are heavily invested in the staff in terms of upskilling them, and you're already on that journey, aren't you, especially on the EV side?
Yeah, so within M Group, we've got around about 10 individuals who've been upskilled to EV. So essentially they are electricians now. So real investment from the company in those people, and it's great to see the number of people that want to get involved in that journey as well. So we're getting our door beat down to say, when can we get more on? When can we get more on? And we're in that holding phase, that between, yes, we want to upskill more because we're going to need to go at volume soon. We probably haven't quite got the volume of work just yet. And working with yourselves on that journey has been so good. Again, I couldn't probably thank you guys enough for the support you've given to us as a business and to our guys along that journey. And yeah, we're really looking forward for the market to explode on EV. But it's a great opportunity for me to workers to upskill. I think it's not without its challenges. For the electricians that might be listening to this, those guys, the art of being an electrician, even just things like hiding the cable run within the house and doing it and making right. That's probably some of the things that the guys that have worked in metering forever probably haven't been as exposed to. So there's some getting the qualifications is one thing. Learning on the job is a bigger thing. And I guess that's the bit that I'm really keen that we support our guys with. Because when we're going and fitting EV chargers, we want it to look professional. We want it to be as smart as possible. People paying for these putting on the walls, they want them to look great. It's new technology. It all needs to be done looking proper. You don't want cables running across walls and all the rest of it wherever possible. So I think that the qualification side of it is one thing. As I said, then learning the art of making right and hiding those cable runs and all the additional stuff that a time-served electrician would just know. Our guys haven't got that just know in the locker right now. Or some of them have. To be fair, some of the guys are ex-electricians and have worked in that environment before. But I think that's a whole new way of working that the guys will be exposed to. And I think that'll be so good for them moving forward.
Definitely. And I think we're massive advocates for the transferable skills in the smart metering workforce, because electricians are incredibly qualified. And, I understand the argument of an electrician who says, well, this took me 3 years to learn. I've been doing it for 10 years and have a lot more experience than you. And there will come to situations and scenarios that a smart meter engineer has probably only seen from the outside and hasn't a clue inside. But I know for sure from doing the job myself and from the training that not just our training centre carries out, but competitors to Universal Skills, it is more than possible and capable, especially on a basic level, for an installer to upskill themselves through a training programme to domestic EV as a stepping stone, really, as a gateway into the further electrical industry. And Absolutely. That enables them to gain that experience, to have somebody that they can speak to if they need help and to be able to further the skills, because ultimately that's where we're going with things like green energy, renewables and electrical solutions within the home, the smart home of the future. You probably saw it at British Gas, if you remember the video that they had probably, over 10 years ago now, their vision for the smart home of the future. That is coming. And I think the EV train is on the track now as well. And I think recently I've been pleased to see in industry, it seems to be getting a little bit closer together, as actually we've got thousands of smart engineers in this industry. And what a waste it would be when all the smart meters are fitted to a point where we just need to maintain them. So let's use this brilliant workforce all over the country to really hit this next mandate, because it's coming. We've seen with the fuel shortage that there's going to be a huge need for EV charge points and electrical vehicles. And over this next 5-10 years, that is going to be the next big thing, with, I believe, air source heat pumps as well, with gas boilers potentially being banned from installation from 2035. So it's great to see, and it's great to hear as well that you're investing in your people. What would your advice be, Scott, to somebody who is looking at potentially getting involved in the energy sector at MDS? What would your advice be to them?
So it'd be do it now, because these all the things you talked about the green energy stuff in the future. We won't get into the whole climate change debate, but what we know is it's coming, and it's not here yet. So be an early adapter, get yourself into this industry, be an early adapter, be ready, and there's going to be so much opportunity in this space moving forward, because ultimately every car is going to be electric. Like I said, every boiler is not going to be gas, it's likely to be electric. everything is going to change towards this greener energy. So getting in early and getting the qualifications to work to, as you say, to be an entry point into the market, and then working with organisations as this market grows naturally. There is a huge opportunity, and you're absolutely right. Those thousands of meter workers out there that I believe have got really strong foundations now in working with gas and electricity. Yes, they're not necessarily working at the same level as an electrician, but they've got that core understanding that Joe Public wouldn't have. And it's a really solid start. They're used to working to processes, they're used to working to procedures, they're used to safety and testing. So it's absolutely transferable. And now's the time to do it, because there's so much opportunity coming our way in future, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. It's the way that it's going, and as every day goes by, we're closer to absolutely a mandate. We already know EV is just the start. So yeah, I would recommend anybody gets involved in this world, because you want to start building up your experience. Because actually, as you move on, yes, the technology will be different. So you say heat pumps and battery storage or whatever it is, it's going to rely on that fundamental principle and understanding of electric and working within a home. So I think now's the time to get involved. Yeah,
it's definitely coming. Like I say, whether you agree with it or not, it's going to be an interesting next phase of green energy and the future skills that are required. Just to wrap things up, Scott, really, if you could give yourself one piece of advice. You mentioned to me at the beginning that when you started at British Gas, you thought it'd just be a stopgap, really, a 6-month job to get yourself together. If you could give yourself one piece of advice when you started out at British Gas, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably, in all honesty, Dan, it'd probably be to wind my neck in sometimes and not act the goose as much as I sometimes did when I was younger. But I think it goes back to my principles again, that don't come to work just because it's a job. Come to work to get better in life, and you're a long time at work, so you need to enjoy it. And generally, I believe people enjoy it when they are safe and when they're developing. So I guess that would be the advice that I would give to myself. Is those are almost the two principles that I would go by. Make sure the environment is safe, and make sure the environment is one where people are learning and are happy to learn. And if people are happy at work, they will develop. They will work harder for you. They will work better. So I guess it's a bit of a fluffy answer is that one. But
that's good.
Everything to me is around the environment and the culture of the workplace. You want people to be happy coming to work. You want people to be enjoying it. And you want people to see that by coming to work, things are improving in their life, and so getting better at what you do in your day job, developing for kind of the next move in your career. I think people should always have a development plan, because that will be the key to enhancing your life.
You've got to enjoy your time, and happiness, I believe, is the greatest currency. If you're enjoying yourself, your time is so valuable, and you can't get it back. So you're right. Exactly. You spend too much time at work to be unhappy, and work can never be easy all the time. But certainly when you look back at the week or the month, you get to an end of the month and you sort of consolidate, and how's work been this month? There should be more good times than bad, that's for sure. Otherwise, Absolutely. You really need to be thinking about what you're doing.
And you will have tough times at work. We all have tough times, but if you can approach it if you approach every day that you just want to get the best out of that day, then you'll have more good days than bad. And don't dwell on the bad ones. Take the learnings from them and focus on enjoying the next one.
Brilliant. Scott, thanks very much for taking the time out to be on the podcast. Really enjoyed it. And we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks a lot.
Big thanks to Scott for taking his time out today to be on the podcast. It was great to hear his thoughts, especially how he got into the energy sector and also what's potentially coming up for the Morrison Data Services workforce. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and we'll see you in the next episode.